Good evening and welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen workshop. We've got a few people signed up for Citizens Forum. First up will be Miss Mary Jane Skinner.
I'm Mary Jane Skinner. I reside at 792 Stones River Road. Tonight I'd like to mention about something going on that troubles me at the detention pond there on Hollandale and Stones River Road. I have a couple of times asked some kids to get out of there. This past week, while some of them were out of school, my daughter-in-law saw some kids out there, and they were on the jets. Is that what they're called? That pumps the water out or anything like that. And the grate had been put back up on the culvert, the big drain pipe. Well, one of the boys took it off, and it's just laying there in front of the opening. And it's very concerning that these kids can go in there with their bikes and play in there. And that's my biggest concern right now in that area is that. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done about it. I had talked to one gentleman about putting a fence up there, and he said it couldn't be done. So I don't know, but I think it needs to be looked into before some child gets hurt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. Next we have Christy, and help me with the pronunciation again.
It's Yedley.
Thank you.
Don't worry. My name is Christy Yedley. I'm here on behalf of the Laverne High School Band. It was brought to my attention last time that you guys received our petition to receive funding for uniforms. And I just wanted to talk about that real quick. So I did some research. 13 years ago, we stood in front of you, asked for money for uniforms. They're wool, they're hot. Our temperatures here are hot and kids are passing out. We'd like to try to get something different. We're not actually trying to replace the whole uniform, maybe just the top. We're active in the community. You've seen us. We're Christmas, parade, Old Timers Day, pep rallies. We're at all basketball games, football games, and our band director wants to expand and show other schools Laverne. So he is going to branch out into other counties this year. We did find out that the Board of Education does give our principal every year funding for nonprofits, but of what I could find out for the last 4 years, the band has not received any of those funds, and that's only the last 4 years that I've been here. I was not able to find out any information past that. I'm guessing that no other organizations have come before you that I've heard of, and that probably is because they're getting that funding from the state. That's discretionary from the Board of Education to our principal to disperse however he feels it's fit, and that's every year. So we're not asking for the full amount of money that was on the paper. That was just a guesstimate of how much the uniforms would cost as a ballpark. We're looking at other options, hopefully cheaper options, but at this point, $400 for one uniform is quite pricey. So, thank you.
Thank you. Last we have Carla Hogan.
I just kind of wanted to expand on what Christy was saying. I did talk to the director of the band. He's been there with us for 4 years. I've put 7 years worth of work into the band because my daughter was in it and now my son is in it. He'll be a junior next year. We do fundraising. It's very hard to get the parents' participation now because our band fees are one of the cheapest here in Rutherford County. And there are still some kids that cannot afford to pay the band fee. So we're just trying to ask for a little bit of help. As Christy stated, the amount of money that it does take to buy new uniforms. And I honestly don't think that it's much just to ask for whatever you guys can afford to give us. Thank you.
Thank you. That is it for Citizens Forum. We're going to move right on into the agenda. The prayer will be with Alderman Church, Pledge of Allegiance with Alderman No. Everyone should have received a copy of the minutes. We will have 2 presentations the night of the meeting, and tonight we will have 1 presentation on Old Nashville Highway Corridor Study. Gentlemen, y'all care to come up?
Sure, appreciate it. My name is Brad Walschmidt. I'm a civil engineer with Kimley Horn, and we spent the past several months working with city staff, Adam Leach and other staff, on this corridor study looking at Old Nashville Highway. So we're here to spend 15 to 20 minutes presenting our findings and conclusions and recommendations. Lee Schumann is the roadway engineer. He and I will tag team this presentation. Make sure I know how to use this. Excellent. So I really want to focus on 5 things with you all today. The first is some of the traffic data that we collected on Old Nashville Highway. The second is, how we forecasted some future growth, traffic growth along along Old Nashville Highway that may occur. Kind of the vision for the corridor based on discussions with city staff as well as our observations on Old Nashville Highway. Some of the trade-offs of different routes the city of Laverne can take on doing something with Old Nashville Highway, and then also looking at some possible new road connections that do not exist today. I know it's kind of hard to see in this figure, but the corridor location is essentially Old Nashville Highway from the southeast side of that yellow line. That's where the Smyrna-Laverne line is. And then you kind of see it forks up there. That's where Stones River Road goes over the railroad to Murfreesboro Road. And then the other part of Old Nashville that goes under that narrow railroad underpass right there, all the way to Murfreesboro Road. That was the area we studied for this corridor study. There's, of course, the city limits to Laverne. And then there's the at-grade crossing and the underpass, just to get some perspective for those of you in the audience. One of the things we did is we collected traffic counts along Old Nashville Highway, as well as Stones River Road. Again, it's kind of difficult to see, but the red and blue are Old Nashville Highway near the railroad underpass, and the blue is Stones River Road. The highest part of Old Nashville Highway is the section between Stones River and Jefferson Pike, and that carries around 14,000 cars a day. Just for some perspective, Murfreesboro Road carries around 23 or 24,000 cars a day. And then Waldron Road, I believe, carries around 30,000 cars a day. So just to give you all some perspective on those traffic volumes. So 14,000 cars a day typically means during the rush hour there's some congestion, but otherwise 2 lanes is for the most part adequate. We also analyzed intersections and got traffic counts at specific intersections. The traffic signals indicate the signalized intersections that we counted and analyzed, and the stop signs are the unsignalized intersections that we analyzed. And so one of the key questions as we talked with Mr. Leach and city staff, there are some key questions. What if Old Nashville over the next 10, 20, 30 years transforms? Some of the key questions we wanted to answer were, what if growth occurs? What would that growth look like if redevelopment happens on the corridor? What would that look like? And then how should Old Nashville Highway function as far as how wide it should be? Should there be sidewalks, those types of things? And then could this area, this was something Mr. Leach had, kind of just brainstormed with us, could this area ultimately become downtown Laverne one day? And again, the key question here is, not when development happens. We certainly did not hear that from Mr. Leach, and that's not what we're saying is when development has, but simply we want to do a study to look at what if it happens. What does that mean for traffic and Old Nashville Highway and the size of this road? That was the purpose of this. And so what we did is we looked at all these parcels that you see shaded, which essentially have frontage along Old Nashville Highway. And again, not when, but what if these parcels were to redevelop over 20 or 30 or whoever knows how many years. You'll see some parcels are outside of Laverne. That's because we did want to consider some of the larger parcels that are in Smyrna, just in case they do, just because, again, Old Nashville Highway doesn't see a city line. It's just one road that goes from past Sam Ridley up to the railroad. So that's why you see some Smyrna parcels there as well. Overall, we looked at roughly 160 parcels that front Old Nashville Highway, which total a little under 450 acres. Now, again, you're making some very assumptions on the amount of traffic that could be generated if these ever do develop in the future. A very high forecast could mean 16,000 daily trips additional to Old Nashville Highway, which is quite a considerable increase. Again, we referenced these volumes that we collected along Old Nashville Highway, the same graph you saw earlier. That's sort of the increase, and I apologize, the yellow's not showing up very well there, but that would be the increase to Old Nashville Highway if all these parcels ever do redevelop at certain densities and land uses, the amount of additional traffic on Old Nashville Highway. If you look at that middle one, again, that's the busier section of Old Nashville between Stones River and Jefferson Pike, and you can see that's around 22,500 daily trips. That's usually getting to around the point where a 2-lane road is not quite serving its purpose. And so that is what we moved into next. And one of the questions we wanted to ask ourselves is, if Laverne has a desire to widen Old Nashville Highway, we want asked, should it be 3 lanes? Should it be 5 lanes? Those are 2 very different ideas. Well, we analyzed both, and we're here to kind of present the findings on both options, on some of the pros and cons on both of those options. So again, we did traffic analysis. Us traffic engineers, we look at level of service sort of like grade school. Level service A and B is very good. Level service C and D is passing, but not as good. F is failing, and we do have an E. So between D and F, there is a level service E as well. And so the findings of Old Nashville Highway are today, Old Nashville Highway is operating at around level service C, D during the rush hours, but C overall, that's acceptable. If you grow all this traffic out 20 years from now, we're looking more at level service E, which is generally considered not acceptable. So again, and then we have the 2 options, a 3-lane road or a 5-lane version of Old Nashville Highway. You can see there, if the 3-lane occurs, it would be level service D/E, and that essentially means during the rush hour, you would still have some times of congestion and level service E, but throughout the off-peaks and during the weekends, it's going to operate more like level service D, which is acceptable in the traffic engineering industry. And then if you were to widen the 5-lane, you're looking at more like level service B or C. And so I think the conclusion here is obviously 5-lane is better from a traffic flow standpoint. More lanes, you can move cars better. But what we're here to present to you is that is one thing to consider, but we also wanted to kind of provide some other information, other ways to look at this 3-lane versus 5-lane, and that's where I'm going to turn it over to Lee, who focuses more on the roadway engineer aspects of this.
Okay, so the first thing that we looked at, once we had our problem here and we wanted to do a little research was, okay, we need to perform a survey. So we got a crew out there to, let's find out how wide this road is right now. Let's find out where the right-of-way is. Let's find out where the property lines are. How many parcels are we looking at? So, we found 22-foot road approximately, goes in and out, about a 50 to 60-foot right-of-way. It varies throughout the corridor. So just, preliminarily, you lay a 3-lane road on there. The right-of-way is about 80 feet. So you're looking 10, 15 feet either side of the road that you're going to widen. You do a 5-lane, 104 feet. You're looking at 22 to 44 feet to each side of the road that you're going to impact. So we wanted to take a look, give you an idea. This is potentially what it could look like. This is a 3-lane section, 2 through lanes, center turn lane. We have buffered bike lanes, grass strip, 5-foot grass strip, 5-foot sidewalk. We envisioned being able to utilize all modes of transportation to give some connectivity and accessibility for all users. And you'll see that on both. And this having multimodal aspects on your projects also helps you with competitive funding later on in the process if you decide to do so. Here's the 5-lane section. You can get a feel. It's very similar to the 3-lane. It's just 2 additional lanes. It's got a much bigger footprint, but like Brad said, you can pretty much put as much volume as you want. It's going to handle it. So, that red doesn't show. So, we look at the 2 things so far and its impact and its level of service, its capacity impact. The 3-lane section is both sections, 3-lane, 5-lane, you're going to take right away. There's no way around it. The 3-lane section, we're talking about taking front yards. The 5-lane section, we're talking about taking houses. And that's not to say that the 3-lane section doesn't have some potential relocations associated with it. We identified about 4 businesses, 2 houses that could potentially be relocated with a 3-lane section. But like I said, the 5-lane section, that would be more significant. And then, of course, we're factoring in level of service capacity. So in our eyes at that point in our study, we said, all right, based on the significant impact that a 5-lane section will have, let's just take a look, see what a 3-lane looks like on paper. Let's get it in plan view. Let's see what we could do, if we can improve some functionality, some geometrics, and how this all would sort out. Because obviously at that point, we didn't know relocation-wise. So we've got a couple of slides that show just different parts along the corridor, just to give you an idea of a few things. This is the beginning of the project where we would widen at Stones River. You can't see so well, but the green is the grass strip. Yellow's the sidewalk, 5-foot sidewalk. Red is the existing right-of-way, and you're probably going to have to imagine here, but the strip behind the yellow is a blue proposed right-of-way, just to kind of give you a judge on how much we widen, how much additional right-of-way we're going to need, what do the impacts look like. This next slide shows a couple of different things. One, it shows a couple of potential relocations. The threshold that we use for a home would be 15 feet from the face of their house to the right-of-way. Anything less than that, we would assume a potential relocation. The other thing that this shows is, we also looked at functionality and geometric deficiencies along the corridor. Jefferson Pike is a pretty prime example of a deficient skew at this intersection. So we thought, what would an optimal skew or optimal intersection look like? And, this is, conceptual thought on where that could go. And improve functionality and provide a more pleasable intersection. The downside to that is there's a business there to require relocation. There's also Finch Branch, which would incur significant environmental impacts if we were to move the road, back toward the gas station. There's also a gas station to contend with. So kind of the point of this was to show here's some ways that we can make some improvements, but they're not without cost. And if you were to decide to go forward with looking at some design of this road, that would be something that really needed to be looked at in the future to weigh out where's the best spot for this intersection. This slide shows just the end of the project. Just, we're showing our widening ending at the city limits. The striping we had to reduce because of the pinch points, the 2 gas facilities. So it would go down to a 2-lane prior to the city limits, but the widening would end at the city limits. And the last slide is just to show Stones River. We found that 2-lane functioned fine for Stones River, but we proposed widening for the buffer bike lanes and sidewalks to continue with your connectivity from Old Nashville to Nashville Highway. So all that to say, always the big question is, what are the costs? We use TDOT planning level estimator tool that they used early on in their projects. It was kind of give us a baseline for what these things will cost. And we looked at design, right-of-way utilities, CEI, construction. The one thing that wasn't as part of these costs are any potential relocations. So this is just baseline, no relocation. So you can see that the 3-lane is about $20 million all in. The 5-lane would be $26 million. And kind of an important thing to note is the 5-lane would require more potential relocations, which that number could significantly increase. And then we also threw in the Stones River. If you decided to make those improvements, that'd roughly be about $5 million to get your design, construction, CEI, all this stuff done. So we circle back. What do we look at? We looked at capacity, we look at cost, we look at impacts. The 2 options, the 3-lane, obvious, less impacts. It's cheaper. Just doesn't have the capacity of the 5-lane. And in our eyes, that, considering maybe the field that you may want for this, if it does develop into a downtown, if you want to have a more walkable, accessible field, a 3-lane may be a good route for you to go. So I believe the next slide is Brad's going to kind of talk about some other things that we looked at along the corridor, some other options, routing.
Sure. So the final part of this was Mr. Leach asked us to look at Old Nashville Highway. He also asked us, he issued another challenge. Again, this is Old Nashville Highway. You see up on the screen. The red circles are essentially that very narrow railroad underpass, as well as some of the very sharp turns that you have through this area. These are the routes that people are taking to get to Murfreesboro Road, taking to get cut over westward to Mason Road and Old Waldron Road. So some sharp curves. So Mr. Leach asked, what are some big picture ideas for possible new road connections that could really provide more of a direct connection from this side of Laverne over to Waldron Road? And so, again, if you can, there's the green arc kind of in the bottom left. That's where Mason Road and Bain Drive were recently reconstructed and realigned. So the question really was, how can we look at a new road connection between those 2 yellow circles that you see on that map? And so we did a very high-level conceptual road. It's going through 2 or 3 properties. One's through a church right there at Old Nash, not through the church, excuse me, but through part of the property that the church owns. I want to clarify that. It's not through the church building, but it is through property that the church owns. And then there's also 1 or 2 very large pieces of property that this would require going through to build this kind of connection. We did some traffic forecasts and saw that a 2-lane road would be sufficient. And if you think about if this road is ever built one day, this would alleviate portions of Murfreesboro Road, especially near the Waldron Road intersection, and also alleviate traffic on Waldron Road. So it would really divert some traffic, give people more options. Those are some of the benefits that this road connection would cost. But again, we're talking about going through some people's properties. That has its own challenges in itself. But essentially, this was the connection that we felt would accomplish another option for vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, things like that. And very similar, we used an estimator to identify roughly what the cost would be. This new road connection, we feel would be approximately around $10 million for the design, the right-of-way acquisition, constructing it. One thing we also recognize is that there's a very large piece of property. Not sure what will happen with that future. I certainly am not in a place to decide what will happen with that property, but if anything happens in the future where there's an opportunity for right-of-way to be dedicated or something like that, essentially if you cross through the right-of-way cost, you're now looking at maybe $7.2 million or so to actually build the road, so just want to identify that. Again, not sure, these are all just projections and ideas, but that's sort of kind of what we're talking about. So we really have 3 or 4 main conclusions, and then we'll open it up to any discussion or questions or answers. The first is, based on the information we've shared with you tonight, we do feel like a 3-lane road perhaps is what Laverne should consider more. That's just our opinion. A 3-lane road with the sidewalks and the bicycle lanes. Sometimes the sidewalks and bicycle lanes may get reconsidered to tighten the right-of-way, but as Lee mentioned, if the city pursues competitive grant money, when you have pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, that is very helpful in pursuing certain types of grants to get that. So that's something for Laverne to consider. And then the last thing was if Laverne is interested in having some sort of new connection between this area of Laverne and over to Waldron Road, consider some sort of connection, perhaps the one that we laid out conceptually or some other alternative, but basically a connection between those 2 yellow circles could really provide people with a more direct route to get between their origin and their destination. And that concludes our presentation of the work we've been doing with Mr. Leach. Wanted to open it up to any questions you may have or discussion.
Does that new road proposal, does that cut through the Park 24 property, or is it just right next to it? I know it's pretty close there.
Right. I believe this, are you speaking of the industrial development by
Yes.
Pantone?
Yes.
So I believe that it does not cut through Park 24. Kind of on the bottom of that screen, you kind of see the curve. We tried to avoid the purple-looking line to the very bottom.
Okay.
I believe below that line is the Park 24 site. And so we intentionally avoided any impact to that property before we curved away, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Where would that new road originate?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't clarify that. I appreciate you asking. So essentially, if you think about the intersection today of Old Nashville Highway and Stones River Road, that's a 3-leg intersection. Mm-hmm. This would create that 4th leg to that existing intersection. There are some property and some businesses nearby. There would be impacts there. I don't believe it, again, just to clarify my previous, I don't believe it impacts the church building itself, but there are other structures that it would impact. But then essentially it travels, southwestwardly as we're showing here.
So when you come up with the estimates, is it based on a value number of the property assessments, or?
It is. I'll go back as fast as I can go to those costs. So as Lee mentioned, these are using a TDOT estimator tool. They use these statewide on the front end of a project to figure out, we want to do a transportation project, how much money should we budget for it? Very high level. It's definitely not specific to Laverne property values. It's more.
It does break down per region, per area.
So Middle Tennessee versus East Tennessee.
It will be similar to what they did on 109?
Yes. Yes, where, down the road there'd be if Laverne wants to pursue this, the design would get more refined, the right-of-way estimate would get more refined. That's kind of how that would work. But yes, that's sort of, it's always a little tricky to estimate right-of-way costs, but all the same, there's a TDOT tool that does that, and so we wanted to use it and prepare that for you tonight.
And you said these prices does not include any relocations. Okay.
And is Adam here? Is Adam, does this go with the 20-year plan on the traffic side? Because I didn't see that road on that 20-year plan.
It is shown on the 2040 master transportation.
Okay. No, I'm talking about the road from Old Nashville to Waldron.
Both of them are on the plan because they were provided with the
Okay.
plan.
Just to clarify, we're talking about the Stones River extension, but now you're referring to the old Waldron Road extension?
Right.
Okay, so.
I have a question, and this is maybe fundamental for you, but I don't do this every day, so I'm going to ask. On the Smyrna side of the Old Nashville Highway connection, if that's something that we do as far as widen that road, Smyrna on the Smyrna side of that connection has a 5-lane there. Then it would narrow down to 2 because we have those 2 gas companies.
Yes.
And then it would widen back out to 3 or 5 if we choose to do that. How will that not become a big bottleneck right there at Old Nashville Highway and Sam Ridley when it's so narrow right there, and that's really kind of a key entrance to
Right.
that road?
And just to make sure I understand, I believe south or east of Sam Ridley, Old Nashville's wider, but I believe north or west of Sam Ridley, Old Nashville's a 3-lane,
Yeah.
but they're working on a project to widen that. They have some federal money to widen that out, so I would say that as far as the narrowing from Sam Ridley to this, right where I'm showing here where those gas infrastructure are, I'm not sure about that merging from the 4 or 5 lane down to the 2 or 3 on the Smyrna side. As far as what we're showing here, which is the 3 lanes on the Laverne side, necking down through the gas infrastructure and then widening back out to 3 lane, that should be, I do not, as a traffic engineer, anticipate many concerns just because hopefully people aren't cruising in that center left turn lane. And so you still have 1 lane in each direction. It's just you kind of taper in together and the cars are a little closer briefly before you widen back out with that center turn lane buffering them.
Right. I
Yes.
just know how people merge or not.
Right. Well, but as far as the 5 lane, when Smyrna's project widens it to 5 lane and that narrows down from a 5 lane to a 3 lane or 2 lane, that could be a merging issue. I think we've all driven through roads where we've seen that or construction zones where that happens. That there will be some little bit of congestion there for that. But as
Yeah.
far as the 3 to 2 to 3, I don't anticipate much on that part.
Alderman Brown, just to give some additional clarification. The reason Smyrna is widening that 5 lanes actually turning movement is to improve the intersection functionality because there's so much traffic that comes down Old Nashville, hits that intersection and backs up the lane. So they're adding additional turning capacity, not so much the additional turning lanes.
Understood.
That's what they're doing. They're adding storage to the intersection, not so much additional capacity through the intersection.
Okay. So I'm just going to repeat what you said because you don't have a microphone, so I want everybody to hear what he said. If I understand correctly, you're saying that the Smyrna side, they're really kind of increasing the flow with the turn lanes. So it's not really so much adding lanes for the purpose of travel, but for the purpose of being able to turn without delaying the people that are traveling straight through.
Right.
Okay.
For instance, if you're coming from I-24 on Sam Ridley and you want to turn left onto Old Nashville to come into Laverne, I believe there's 1 left turn lane right now. Well, they have a federally funded project to add a 2nd left turn lane. Well, if you do that, you got to have a 2nd receiving lane. So that's sort of the reasoning for the widening of that section. Is that correct, Adam? Okay.
Good.
And when you get down to the overpass, what's the next step there?
Yes.
It just looks like it kind of ends at the overpass.
Yes, the railroad underpass here. So that was a question.
Underpass, yeah.
So that was a question we had with Mr. Leach and with them, our team, and we kind of decided that's going to be a challenging endeavor to do anything there, not only because it's a narrow underpass, but there's railroad coordination that would be involved. So what we kind of felt was let's maybe focus more on Stones River Road to provide people with a better feeling option on driving on that road, and then also look at that new connection that we had on the exhibit that would go from Mason Road to...
Can you go back to the count there on that road?
Yes. Again, let me, pointing, I'll get there eventually.
We just really want to see your whole presentation all
We'll
over again.
do it backwards, yes, yes. All right. I'm almost there, I promise. I'm gonna get, yeah, that one will suffice right there. So the blue is Stones River Road. The red is Old Nashville Highway, pretty much near that railroad underpass. So,
Does that change in the evenings? It just seems like in the coming home traffic, we have more problems where they're making that right-hand turn off of 4170 onto Old Nashville Highway.
that's a good question. We have the data, and I could follow with Mr. Leach to forward that to you. We have the data to answer your question, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
No, that's fine.
Because generally, Old Nashville Highway, just so you all know, some roads in the metro area of Nashville region really spike during the commute hours and then
Right.
dip. Our observation was Old Nashville Highway does that a little bit, but it's relatively flatter compared with some other roads in the region. But as far as the actual underpass, that may not be the case, so we can follow up and provide that info.
That'd be wonderful. So it's about an 800 car difference.
It is, yeah. I mean, you can see it. Well, I think it's more about 1,200. I think
12,
65. Yeah, about 1,200 car
1,200
difference.
cars.
I mean, high level speaking, it's about 50-50. So I mean,
Yeah.
you have an equal number. So I mean, yeah, we that was something Mr. Leach and us talked about was that underpass, and there's just not a cheap, reasonable solution. We could certainly engineer something for you, but the costs and the coordination would be difficult. So our thought was provide a different option, really improve another route, and hopefully perhaps the traffic will divert away from this narrow underpass.
That's kind of a historical site for Laverne anyway.
Is it?
When it rains.
Yeah. Maybe not historical, but good landmark. You know where the underpass is? Oh, yeah. Well,
Any more questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Moving on to old business, second reading, 2019-08. An ordinance to amend Title 14, Chapter 5 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding the membership of the Board of Zoning Appeals. This was discussed last month, where basically this second reading and the next one basically just bring those two boards in alignment with the rest when it comes to how those are worded in our municipal code.
So does this have any meanings to replace or add to the board and membership, or?
No, this, like I said, this brings both of these boards, both Stormwater and BOZA, into that same area as the rest of them. For some reason, they were just left off. Any other questions? Second reading, ordinance 2019-09, and an ordinance to amend Title 14, Chapter 8, Section 14-802 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding the membership of the Stormwater Appeals and Advisory Board. Again, just exactly what we were discussing with BOZA, just bring those basically up to par with the other ones with the same language.
What is the benefit for doing that?
Well, it provides consistency overall. So that's the biggest thing. We need to be consistent with all of our boards and not just have one here works this way, one here works this way. That way, future boards, whether it's BOMA, city administrators, they have that consistency straight through.
All right, thanks.
Moving on, second reading ordinance 2019-10, an ordinance to amend Title 3, Chapter 3, Section 3-306 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding court costs. This was discussed last month about taking the court costs to, I believe, $91.25. Were there 90 even or 91?
It's 90 even right now.
Any questions? Second reading, ordinance 2019-11, an ordinance to amend Title 8, Chapter 3, Section 8-310 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding the application for and issuance or refusal of a beer permit. This received a favorable recommendation from the Beer Board on April 18th, 2019. Again, this was discussed last month. Any questions about it? Second reading, ordinance 2019-12, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2018-2019 general fund budget. And you should see in your packet all of the different items from the consent agenda from last month was in there.
So I'm confused with what exactly are we amending? What's the amendment about? I mean,
It's
the
amending-
dollar amount?
Yes, it's amending the general fund budget. It's taking several items that were requested in the upcoming budget that were one-time purchases and going ahead and we're able to purchase them now out of this budget. Moving on, so second reading, ordinance 2019-12, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. This one, actually it's 2019-13, I'm sorry. This is the one that goes through the health insurance, and you'll see all the various departments for that, to shore up those health funds. Second reading, ordinance 2019-14, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2018-2019 stormwater fund budget. And again, this is dealing just with the health insurance. Second reading, ordinance 2019-15, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2018-2019 water and sewer fund budget. This is a combination of the health insurance as well as a few of the capital items that we had discussed that could come out of this year's budget, some sewer and water equipment. Second reading, ordinance 2019-17, an ordinance to amend the Laverne Municipal Zoning Ordinance as it pertains to the overlay districts. This received a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission on April 30th, 2019. There will be a public hearing that'll be held on June 4th at 6:30 p.m. Any questions about this?
If you can just explain it a little bit better. I was not the planning commission. I'm just needing a little more knowledge on it, please.
Okay, this is the, if I'm remembering correctly, this is the one that deals with auto exemption with the overlay districts and removing an auto exemption when it comes to change of use so that it will come before the planning commission to either approve that or deny that or review that versus an auto exemption that prevents, basically, you could have, pink building next to a green building, next to a brick building. And this brings that back before the planning commission so that it's just not auto exempted, it's something that we can do to improve the look and feel of both of our overlay districts.
Thank you.
Second reading, ordinance 2019-18, an ordinance to amend the Laverne Municipal Zoning Ordinance as it pertains to signs. This received a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission on April 30th, 2019. A public hearing will be held at 6:30 p.m. on June 4th, 2019. Any questions? Second reading, ordinance 2019-19, an ordinance to amend the Laverne Municipal Zoning Ordinance to remove automotive repair from commercial zoning districts. This received a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission on April 30th, 2019. And again, a public hearing will be held at 6:30 p.m. on June 4th, 2019. Any questions?
Yeah, this is the one I had some concerns with about the auto repair. Is that what this one's about?
Mhm.
I still have a concern with that. Would that be a question for Evan?
What's your question?
Be a question. My concern is we have local businesses that currently do auto repair. There's from what I'm learning from staff and other members of the board, there's a fine line of auto repair and auto service. So I don't want our city to get into a gray area of, discriminating against one type of business that does the exact same thing. It just has a different verbiage.
Sure.
So Maybe you can assist us with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, anytime you have something like this, the definition of the use is important. Really, the only way you can look at it is on a case-by-case basis, because you don't know exactly what one business claims it's doing versus another unless you actually know exactly what's going on. So it's sort of hard to paint with a broad brush. I don't know if there's a good way to answer your question other than to say that there's no prohibition, obviously, against making this change, but whether or not that might result in a problem later on down the road is hard to foresee. There's nothing wrong legally with this ordinance, but if the question is, will this ever create a problem down the road, I mean, it's hard to predict.
And this doesn't eliminate auto repair from Laverne, from new auto repair from coming to Laverne. This still allows it, specifically in industrial zoning. Again, these three are all kind of tied together to improve that look and feel of our city.
No, I understand that part of it, but where I was struggling, and I was hoping I'd get a better answer from legal, is if you have a company that comes in, like a corporate company that's national, and they're gonna do auto repair, but they're a national company, will that be, and they build $1 million building in our overlay district, that would be allowed, but yet if we have somebody that's, you know, like a mom and pop company that wants to put in a building, maybe a brick front or something, but they're not a national company, and their facts are, their means are different. It looks like more of a financial means.
This doesn't address them from a national or a mom and pop, as you've said. It doesn't look at that. It looks solely at the definition of auto repair.
It puts them on an even playing field.
It does?
If it's a national company that comes in worth $1 billion and they want to put a car dealership or a repair shop in a commercial zoning, it's no.
As long as they use the word service.
If they want to put, that's what they're going to clear up, and it becomes for the board for them to do that.
And it's not using the word service, as you just said. It's going by the specific definitions that's outlined. Those definitions can be altered if you don't like how they are. I know we've discussed that in the Planning Commission, so that's something that we can, if you're interested in changing those, we can change that.
I'm not interested in changing. I'm interested in getting some support or denial from when our legal staff can't tell us that, you know, yeah, it's a gray area.
Well, I guess, to be frank, I don't understand what the question is.
Okay. I guess the question would be, is it a potential, do we have to look at being sued down the road when we have somebody coming in that wants to put something in that area that a larger company will call it service and they want to call it auto repair, when you can't define the difference of the two? Service and repair, how do you define that?
There are definitions in the zoning ordinance for those two specific uses, and they are different.
This ordinance doesn't draw a distinction between national chain or mom and pop. There's nothing in
No, it doesn't, but it does say service and repair. It does.
which apparently are defined, so I don't know.
And that distinction was already established through the Planning Commission with those definitions. So this just takes one specific one and says it's still allowed in the city. It's just, instead of it being in our commercial zones, it's in our industrial. So whether they're the mom and pop, whether they're the multi-million, they can still come here.
Okay, thank you.
And I ask you, this doesn't have anything to do with the existing ones that may be there, and just the new ones coming in?
Correct.
Okay,
The existing would be grandfathered.
gotcha.
Moving on to consent agenda. Ms. Felicia.
Good evening, Mayor and Alderman. We've got a few items. Channel 3. $221,022.74. Hopefully no change orders, but there's no guarantee. Any questions?
I say getting up there, looking around, it's a mess. So I think we all feel for Jerry. We know that this needs to be done.
I just want to remind everyone that the reason that this is important is to be in compliance with the law
Yes.
about being digital.
Well, this
which we
is
are
a
past due to be
over
compliant.
20-year-old station.
Right. And this will allow us to do closed captioning as well, which is taking other municipalities off the air because they can accommodate that.
Yes, so it's very much a needed project. Just wanted to let you know that though. The next one is our HVAC, which is just one that we do about every 3 years just to keep maintenance on all of our equipment. And of course, as you look at it, air conditioning services is, they've been working well with us for the last several years. And they came in low bidder again, so we recommend just keeping it with them. Any questions? Okay. The next one is the meter reading software for the water department. This is part of your budget amendment, and we're bringing it before you because it's $32,050. This is pretty much a sole source because it's through the Badger Meter Company that we have our Badger meters through. Any questions there? Okay, the next one is the equipment for the police vehicles that we asked for last month. We're coming back now with a detailed list of the equipment and the cost of the equipment for all the vehicles. Any questions there? The next one is for the computers and the in-car cameras for 4 of the vehicles that are going to be outfitted with cameras and computers. And these are pretty much sole source because that's what we're running in all vehicles and they have to work together.
That's the price, that's a total price for just for 4 units.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. That is for 4 computers and the radar, the video system and the laptop. It's not cheap to outfit these cars.
No.
Not cheap at all.
Never has been.
Nope. Any questions? And I will step aside because I think Jamie's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chief Walker, would you like to comment? I don't have any questions. I was just sticker shock, you know.
I could explain it.
If it's the sole source, it's.
And I think next we've got the approval annual contract with TDOT for the maintenance of Murfreesboro Road.
Hey, with this here, do we have any more information, Garland, on the situation with the inmates with the workers' comp?
I've not heard anything this time.
But this is something we do annually when it comes to the maintenance agreement. Then we have change order number 4 for the water treatment plant improvements project. Jamie?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Aldermen. This is for change order number 4, which will amend the existing construction contract for the water treatment plant improvements project for the additional time and cost associated with the replacement of the raw water intake discharge line, the 12-inch check valves that are original to the plant, the air relief valves that are original to the plant, the access hatch to get to this equipment, and installing new pressure gauges on these lines, and for the installation of a drainage swell at the main plant building to help around the parking lot area. This change order will add $86,253 and 50 calendar days to this contract. The contractor has agreed to this change order, and we do recommend this for approval pending your vote. Do you all have any questions?
And you said that this changes out several pieces to the water treatment plant that were original back in the early 90s.
1992 is when the majority of this equipment was installed. So, and they're out of date, and the check valves themselves, you can no longer get replacement parts to just repair those. It has to be a full replacement, and the access to it is pretty limited, which kind of dominoed into additional items. So,
with these change orders, when they do the original bid for the scope of work, was any of this in that bid?
These were not, I was not aware of those at the time.
My question, I guess, would be when we know something was the original parts from 1992 and it's not put in the scope of work, would that be something we look into in the future to have a widening range of the scope of work so we don't have change orders by the original contractor? It makes it a little more fair for the other people that are bidding on the projects. Because if we see in the future, you know, some things you're gonna know it's gonna have to be repaired. We knew, you know, when the original bid went out, that there were 1992 parts.
It's easy to see that in hindsight, but I guess in fairness, your entire plant was built in 1992, or at
Right.
least half of it, so it's difficult, if it's not broken at the time, or it hasn't been relayed to me that this is something that needs to be a capital project, it's very difficult for me to know to include that. I mean, I understand, yes, it's 1992, but at the same time, you could go through your whole plant and say that about numerous pieces of
Right.
equipment.
It's just every time we have a corrective of action, we fix something and then 100 feet down to something else, and then
Right.
100 feet down. So
And with this, the
I would think
reason
we would look into it.
you could do this as a separate project, we just felt that it was best to include it in this one because it's directly related to the intake work that we have been doing, and it will be critical to getting you back at 3 pumps at all times. Because right now, you know, you could use that line, it's just with a broken check valve, you're not getting the greatest performance out of your pump. It's affecting pump performance. So we felt this was the most cost-effective way to do it for the city.
But and that's where my problem is. Because it is a different scope. I'm wondering why it's not going out on bid.
It's not a different scope.
It's not in the original scope.
It's not an original scope, but it's not a different scope. This is something that needs to be repaired, so we can do one of two things. We can do a separate project, which then, in turn, you're gonna have to pay for extra engineering. You're gonna have to pay to put it out to bid. Then you're gonna have to pay probably a markup. To where right now, this is a project we've got currently going on, and what Jamie's trying to explain is that we have pumps right now that we've got replaced that are not gonna be working efficiently or effectively and may not be able to keep up with broken parts. So once we noticed that the parts were broken, we got costs from the contractor, and that's what we're bringing for you is, you know, we always get told that it's broke, why didn't you fix it? Well, it's broke and we're bringing it to you. Now you're saying, why do you want to fix it?
No, I'm asking the question why it wasn't bid. That was my question.
Because we didn't know it was broke.
When did we find out that it was broke?
That was, I'd say, roughly March of this year, and I've been working directly with vendors and contractors trying to find the best competitive solution for replacing it.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I'm still questioning. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So you talked to other vendors and other contractors for the repairs?
I've talked to, well, what it boils down to is that check valve itself, prior to 2012, there were not standard lay lengths, there were not standard, AWWA did not have standards for these valves. So this is a valve that was, it's a 26-inch, the standard now is 27-inch. There is a manufacturer that still manufactures this, they just don't have the repair kit to repair the one that's there. That's why it's for replacement. So there's different folks that sell this valve. And I believe the contractor, I talked to several, and he got his best price as well from the vendors he works with.
Basically, she's done the research that we asked for to make sure that the Laverne residents get what they deserve and what is best for the plant.
What other engineering would be needed that you stated?
No, I said she's done the research of asking, okay, if something's broke, you gotta look at, do you fix it, do you repair it, or do you replace it?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, so that's what she's done. She's done the research. She's saying
this was originally done in 92, okay? You can't get the parts no more. So if you can't, fix it, then that means you gotta replace it. So then she's reached out to see who does replace it, who doesn't replace it, who sells the part, who has the part, all that kind of stuff. She's done all that information and research and gathering and is, bringing it back to you for approval.
Yeah, I understand that part of it. My question to you was, what was the additional engineering that would be required if we were to bid it out?
Oh, to bid it out, you'd have to redo a project.
We have to put,
Contractor has to bid on a plan. So if you don't have a plan put together and said, hey, we need to replace A, B, and C, and have contract stipulations on it, they don't even know what to bid. So putting those documents together costs money.
Any more
That's what
questions?
you provide for us, right?
yes, sir, and, yes, I've done the technical part already as part of this change order, but with every contract, there's a lot of front-end information that changes, and you have to go through all of updating that information, getting the bid bonds, awarding a project, doing a whole nother pre-con.
And these questions are for informational purposes,
Sure.
because the change orders that you bring to us, it's not $5,000.
Oh, I
There are hundreds of
understand.
thousands of dollars just since we've been elected.
Sure.
So
And
it's not singling your firm out. It's just asking.
no, and I don't go rooting around your plant looking for work.
No, I don't think. I mean,
We're
you
here
probably
just
could find a lot more.
to serve you guys and do the best that we can and support the plant and the city.
The goal is to get the plant up to par. I mean,
Yes,
we're all
sir.
on the same page with that.
I
It's
have a
also we
question
want
also. If you were to create a holding project and bid this out, what would the potential cost in excess of what you're asking for the change order probably be, just off the top of your head, round figure?
I'd say easily 20% with just the front end, the bidding, different contractors having, the contractor you have, we've worked with several times and they've always been very competitive on their pricing. They're typically low bidders, so I do feel like they are given a fair price.
And if it was bid out for a second contract, how much would it delay the project in time?
That's really the issue on this, is the delay of time, because it takes time to compile the documents. We have to send it to TDEC. That's a 30-day turnaround. With this, a change order, you can proceed with it. You just have to notify them of it. But before you bid it and award it, they have to have approval. So that adds 30 days. Just the award from when I bring it to you guys till we have an actual pre-con is typically another 30 days. Then the contractor has his lead time of getting the materials and getting mobilized and on site. So it can add quite a bit of time. And that was my concern as far as waiting on that, was adding that. And I know the plant looked at it too. It was just a little bit more labor intensive when you couldn't utilize the existing hatch and the access to it. So we've tried to look at this every angle to give the best solution for the city.
And when we see the $52.55 an hour, that's the hourly rate for the labor, and then the 15% markup on top of that is for what reason?
That's the contractor. That's his cost of doing business. You can see on the materials portion, I've negotiated the best I could with him on that. He did reduce that to 7% from his typical 15%. That's for his overhead. He has to pay his employees insurance, benefits. I guess the best way to say is the cost of doing business.
Any more questions?
Thanks.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks.
Moving on to D, approve memorandum of understanding with the Rutherford County Schools regarding police department training at school facilities. Chief, this is where we normally do some of the SWAT training or exercises through there.
Yes, there's various training sessions, and we had a situation where school was out one day, and we had Conrad had scheduled it several weeks before. That was at LHS. And when they got there, everybody came in, they got there, we weren't permitted to train because nobody was there. And David Krim, who is the new school security director, who is former SRO and was here in Laverne for several years, David is the new RCS employee that handles that. And when we talked to him about what some of the issues we'd had here and there and yonder. We started working on it. Their legal staff prepared a MOU that would allow us to go in the schools, predetermined, upfront, planned for, and approved by the principals there at the time, that we can go in and train there, as long as we don't have folks there, unless it is a planned event where RCS employees are there as well. And the reason for that is because of our current ATRIC training that fire, EMS, law enforcement, et cetera, are doing together. And it's something that's not really happened a whole lot in the state of Tennessee. So we're kind of in the front end of the pack getting that done, because everybody's training together to ensure our children are safe. And that just gives us the authority to do that.
Chief, will this cover Chief Clark's guys also? Yeah.
It will if they're training with us, yes.
Okay.
9 times out of 10, when we're training that type of event, we are with law enforcement.
Yeah,
We're
it just
a
it says Laverne Police. I didn't know if it was something we need to add Laverne
Well,
Fire also.
No, because the fire side would be a little bit different, but like Chris said, most of the time we're gonna be there together, period.
Right.
Because if they go, we're gonna go anyway. Or if we go, he's going with SWAT, that's for sure, because he's our medic.
And if I'm remembering from the school board meeting, they've exempted us from any kind of costs with this.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. E, approved master agreement with AT&T Corporation for Police Department Communication Services. Chief, you want to talk about this?
I will. We have to have a fiber line running from Station 3 all the way downtown to the Tackin major master site downtown, so that we have connectivity for our backup at Station 3. T1 line, simple copper T1 line will not handle it. It's got to be fiber. And this is, I can't remember, it's almost top of the line speed and capability and up and running when need be. It would automatically switch over, and there we go.
And that's right around 30,000.
It's about 5,000 or so, isn't it, Bruce?
5,000.
You
Oh,
remember?
I see what I did.
There's 2 different agreements basically that go hand in hand. You've got this master agreement with AT&T, and then the next agreement, 15F, really gets into the cost of it, because it's more specific to this
Now,
line.
there's a table in there,
Right, that's on the next agreement.
and
So do they have a not to exceed number anywhere?
oh, it's on the next one, okay. I'm sorry, what?
Do they have a not to exceed number, or is it just open-ended?
Well, it's AT&T cost for the lines. I mean, it's like having phone lines. You got to have it.
Yeah.
We have to have it for that, so whatever their cost is going to be, they tell us now what the monthly would be based on the data amount we're sending and so on and so forth, up to so on and so forth. And if the monthly fee changed, it would change automatically.
So let's go ahead and go over to F, since that's hand in hand with this, and that's the approved agreement with AT&T Corporation for switched Ethernet service for the police department.
Yes.
You should have this contract in your packet.
And that's with the training and everything, right? Down here at the bottom.
We don't need training.
You don't need
It will be hooked up, and all we'll do is go turn our radios on over there and have them up and running, and it'll be a direct connect automatically. We'll have a microwave tower here at the PD that will go to Cane Ridge. We will have, on the backup side, we'll have to have the fiber at Station 3 in the event the microwave goes out.
I just seen on here, Fire Online on web, $990.
That's you're in the ESO one.
Okay.
Different item. You should have the data rates with the AT&T logo for
And
the
they go
back.
together, right?
The ESO is completely separate.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The E and F go together. G is completely different.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions about the switched Ethernet service? Okay. G, approved master subscription and license agreement with ESO Solutions Incorporated for fire department software. This is the software that we discussed at the planning retreat, and it is going to integrate in on the iPads that we've discussed for reporting. Is that right, Chief Clark?
That is correct. Now, this is the one that's $30,000.
Yes.
You are correct.
Yeah.
So this is the user agreement with that. Any questions about it? Chief, how many of the tablets are we going to have? I don't remember off the
It'll
top
be
of my head.
12 tablets. We're keeping 1 or 2 to spare in the event that they tear up. They'll tear up. Anytime we're out in the field, they're going to tear up at some point in time.
We are investing in protection.
Hard cases.
Yes.
We are.
Wonderful.
But we do have our new life safety officer will have one, and he will be utilizing that on a day-to-day basis on the pre-plant or the inspections. Our fire guys will use this on their fire, their medical, and their pre-courtesy inspections. We will be using this on quality assurance. When what we do is we provide a quality assurance program for our medical reports so that we know that our fire department is providing the right treatment for the right patient. And then it allows us to see where we need or where we're lacking in training. So these iPads will be operational every day. Also, we have a cloud there which we will allow the police department to look at that using those pre-planned models in the event that there is a need for that. So we'll automatically have those pre-plans for the police department in the event of an active shooter or those kind of things.
Okay. Any questions? Moving on to H, approve the submittal of a grant request to the Christie Houston Foundation for the fire department. Chief Clark, this is going with the active threat equipment you were wanting?
Yes, sir. This, to be honest with you, this came up pretty quick. I've sought Homeland Security grants for this equipment. For the most part, for the city of Laverne, and we have received them. We've actually got 30 more vests that will be issued out here in the next week or so through Homeland Security. However, there are other agencies that are in the county that have not received that. They have applied for a grant. During this process, they've asked if we would like to join in. This is a prime opportunity for us to finish out that active threat personal protective equipment, along with some triage bags that we've all collectively working together to find a standard response. I totaled it up today. It's about $10,000 for the city of Laverne. I think the total of this grant will be well over $100,000. We are a very, very small portion since we've already been looking ahead and already received a lot of this equipment. So we're looking for 10 ballistic helmets. That will finish out our fleet. Each seat will have a ballistic helmet. Each individual firefighter will have a vest that is outfitted with tactical medic type style equipment. And then we'll have 3 triage bags which will be located in each quint, and they will be able to have extra supplies. Once we're inside, we're able to treat a mass casualty event properly, and then inside those bags will be litters where we can haul patients out to an evacuation area.
And this is 100% grant.
I talked to chief folks today. That's what we're shooting for.
And this won't affect us like double dipping, right?
No, sir. It shouldn't.
Do we have to let them know that we've received already from a grant? Okay. I know the Christie that foundation, they're strict.
I personally spoke with the Christie Houston Foundation representative. They were there during our training, and I told them we have planned ahead
Yeah.
in Laverne, but this is a cooperation between Murfreesboro, Laverne, so our amount cost is
That's why it's
minimal.
minimum, yeah.
Right.
Good.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief Clark. I approve easement on city property at 5063 Murfreesboro Road for TDS Telecom. This is, Bruce, if I'm remembering right, this is over at the library, and
Correct.
this is basically a telephone or fiber box for TDS.
Correct. It's a 10-foot by 10-foot easement that's actually on city property along the 73rd Avenue. And it's for some, I guess it's the 5G that they're TDS.
No, that's the XO. The TDS
Okay.
is fiber.
That's right.
The fiber to allow fiber into the library for internet, and then it'll also be their main junction point, for a better term, for businesses in that area, so they can buy high-speed internet service, fiber service to their businesses. So they don't have, TDS did not have any kind of hub at that area of the city, so that not only would it give us the ability to bring fiber into the library, but it would also provide all those businesses there that opportunity as well.
Okay, any questions? Okay, that completes the consent agenda. Moving on to new business, we will have first reading ordinance 2019-20, an ordinance of the City of Laverne, Tennessee, adopting an annual budget and tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. Still putting the final touches on the budget together. I know I've gotten from Alderman No and Alderman Jones some suggestions. I know you had sent over some beforehand. I don't know if anything's changed from those.
Nope.
To have a budget together, and we can sit down and get that emailed out before the meeting, probably this week, to the board. But are there any other changes other than what's been submitted over that anyone wants to bring up or suggest? Okay. Moving on to first reading ordinance 2019-21, an ordinance to amend Title 8, Chapter 2 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding the sale of alcoholic beverages for on-premises consumption. This is the one that takes time out of our municipal code for the sales and defaults to the state time when it comes to the beer sales.
This does a lot of things, actually, and that's one part of it. There are a lot of sections in our current municipal code regarding liquor by the drink that we can no longer enforce due to changes in the state law. And this ordinance should bring us back in compliance with state law. And one of those is the hours. But there are several things that we can no longer do that we used to do, thanks to the legislature changing the rules on us. So a lot of this is modeled after what Murfreesboro has in their municipal code. So it's very similar to what they have.
What's the biggest difference as far as the percentage food to alcohol thing?
There's nothing in here about food ratios because the state permit licenses everything when it comes to a liquor permit. So we can't have any kind of ratio requirements or limits or anything when
So
it
that's by the
comes to
state.
liquor. So that's all handled by the state, and they have different levels of permit based on what ratio you are going to be selling at.
And does this deal with hours?
No, we have nothing in this ordinance that deals with hours because there again, that's all handled by the state.
The prior version,
We're
though,
still
had
waiting on
hours.
Right, our prior version did have hours in it, but this takes that out.
Yes, so
Completely.
this drops it back to basically being what the state is versus our own version.
Okay.
So on Sundays, what time are we allowed to drink before the football games?
I believe state allows 10
New
o'clock.
state law's 10 a.m.
Yeah.
10 a.m.? So we fall back to the state law now with this ordinance?
Correct.
Liquor, yes.
Any other questions? First reading ordinance 2019-22, an ordinance to amend Title IX of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding mobile food vendors. Essentially, this is our food truck ordinance. Bruce, do you want to take us through the ins and outs? I know we've gone around and about with it with both you and Evan.
This is kind of it's a new chapter. We currently don't really have any rules and regulations for food vendors specifically. What we have been using in the past is the transient merchant permit that is in Title IX, Chapter 1 of our municipal code, but it's not really specific to food trucks. So this adds basically definitions and everything, for canteen trucks, food trucks, and ice cream trucks are the three primary items that we're addressing. It talks about location and hours. We are also putting in here where they can operate on city property, including city parks, but only at times and locations as allowed by the city. So we could have like food truck rallies when we have our events like Old Timers Festival, that puts it in compliance with that. Or they can just have an individual event and have food trucks come out like other cities do and have those type of events. So this basically, it just puts all of the rules and regulations in place. They will have to have a permit to operate within the city, and it goes into all of the details for that. We worked with the fire department on some different things as far as what they would like to see as far as fire extinguishers, ventilation systems, whatnot for the food trucks, for safety purposes. There are some limitations as far as where they can be located. And like I said, it's just a massive overhaul of food trucks, because as you can see, they're popping up all over town.
So this is
because we don't.
This is for existing and incoming?
Well, see, the current permits, they're only good for 6 months. So after 6 months, when they expire, they will have to renew, and they will have to come in compliance with the new municipal code section. So, they may not go into effect for the current people right now, but when their current permits expire, the transient merchant permits, then they'll have to go through this process to get renewed, essentially.
So how does that work on a sales tax side? Do they get a city business license?
I mean, they should already have one if they're operating in the city. So, I mean, that's all handled through the state mostly now. So, they can apply for a business license here, but.
So do we require that? I don't see that in here.
I'm not sure if that's stated in here specifically or not. I'd have to look for it. I'm thinking it does mention it in here, but I'd have to find it.
I may have overlooked it. I mean, that's just my.
It's 9 pages, so it's a lot of verbiage in here.
And what about those propane tanks, Chief? The large propane tanks that are just sitting behind the trucks.
We've already addressed a few of them already, and as long as they operate safely. Just, one of the things, we all use propane tanks for our grills at home and things, and they're fairly safe. However, flame impingement, tampering, things like that.
Or at least get them chained up or something.
Correct. Falling over.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that we'll go out and inspect. That new life safety officer, he'll be on it, along with Curtis, and try to make it as safe as possible. And we use those tanks every day at home.
If you could just look, and I mean, I'll continue to read it also, but just make a note for that business license.
On
That's
page,
something that we
I found it. It's on page 3 of the ordinance, section 9-904. Paragraph B at the very bottom of the page, licensing mobile food service vehicles must be licensed in accordance with the rules and regulations of any local, state, and federal agency having jurisdiction over motor vehicles, and all products sold therein must be properly licensed, permitted, and allowed by local, state, and federal laws. So that would include a business license.
Good. And if they get a business license, then that will also trigger the sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the little ice cream trucks that run around town?
There are some guidelines in here for them as well.
Where it talks about not coming on city property, like when they come to the
right around
the
the park.
playground, the park, and things like that? Would that be an issue, or?
Well, if you, here again, it's also on page 3, it talks about what they can or cannot do. It's number 3, kind of just below the middle of the page, ice cream trucks.
Ice cream trucks.
It specifies locations where they can operate. They have to basically keep moving, but on private property, they can operate with permission of the property owner. But then, you know, if you just read through that, it does talk about how they can operate only a certain number of days per week at that specific location.
Okay.
And of course, hours of operation, you know, they can operate after 11 a.m. and before sunset. So it does add some guidelines in there for them.
Any other questions? Moving on to first reading ordinance 2019-23, an ordinance to amend Title 20, Chapter 2, Section 20-208 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding Parks and Recreation user fees. And you're seeing your packet, it's pretty much, this is just a sentence at the end of the existing, or basically the end of what we've already got. We're talking about booth rentals for agricultural vendors, arts and craft vendors at city-sponsored events, saying that they're not required to obtain a park vendor permit.
Hey, I see this here about the baseball, softball tournaments. I have a concern with this, with the existing folks that are running the league. So in the contract that we had in the...
Well, that would be something different from this.
That part's already existing.
Yeah, that's already in there. This is an addition, just that last line that's highlighted at the end.
It's on the second page.
So my question is, where it talks about the tournaments, it's not a good time to ask that question?
Well, that's not what this ordinance is changing. This is only going through the permitting process for agricultural vendors and arts and craft vendors. So if you wanted to change involving tournaments, you would need to.
No, I don't want to change. I want to ask a question.
Well, I'm saying that, but that's not what this is about. This is about, I mean, your question, what we're discussing is booth rentals. We're not discussing the tournaments, because that's not changing in this.
Is this kind of like dealing with Old Timers Festival?
Exactly.
Is that what this is for?
Old Timers Day could factor in with any of the other ones, Trail of Treats,
Okay.
different events that we have there.
Farmers market was a big concern.
Yeah.
What?
The farmers market was a big concern.
Oh, yeah, that's not gonna happen, is it?
Well, I mean, if we required a park vendor permit, you know, cost $75 and then they have to pay $15 a week, it might be price prohibitive for some of the vendors to go.
Any other questions? Moving on to number 20, motion to appoint or remove board committee members. First one is Economic Development Advisory Committee. We've got one term vacant, and current applicant is Jim Anderson. Then moving on over to Greenway Advisory Committee. We've got two terms expiring. We've got Laura Davidson and Brian Bizzari. Mr. Bizzari has already stated he does not wish to remain on this board, and Laura Davidson has. Miss Mary Jane Skinner has applied for this board. Moving on to Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, two terms expire. We've got Deborah Hewen and Bob Simon. Both have requested to remain on this committee. And then this is an FYI, but Economic Development Advisory Committee, we've got three terms expiring at the end of June. Mr. Tom Clark, Graham Coates, and Nathaniel Holtzman. We will reach out to them to see if any of them wish to remain on the board, and of course this will be advertised as with any time we have openings. They start advertising those on Channel 3. Moving on to 21. We've got a discussion, brick orders, Veterans Memorial Park. Mr. David McGowan.
Mayor, Alderman, thank you. What we're proposing is to take the memorial brick price up from $25 to $35. Sales have really slowed down since we initiated them. And anything less than 10 brick orders at a time, we're getting hit with a $15 shipping fee. So this is to help absorb some of those additional costs.
So essentially, whenever we're doing basically one brick order at a time, we're, as the city overall, it's costing the city money versus.
Correct. If we order 1 brick, 5 bricks, 6 bricks, anything less than 10, we're having to pay the $15 shipping and handling.
Okay.
So this is just trying to absorb some of those costs so the city is not coming out of pocket with anything.
And usually any remainder portion that we have left over goes to a maintenance fund for the Veterans Wall. Is that correct?
Correct. And what generally goes in there, I think the city purchases brick, people purchase a brick for $25. I think they cost the city $19. So $6 goes into a fund. But if we're getting orders of 1 or 2 at a time, we don't like them sitting around for any length of time. So we're having to pay the $15, and that $15 comes out of that fund. So this is just basically trying to get us where it's not costing us anything. It's pretty much just a break-even point for the city.
And where it's at, whenever you get these orders, they're spread out, so it may be several weeks.
Correct.
Before you get another
Yeah.
one.
If you were to come in and put in a brick order, it may sit there. We don't like it sitting there any more than 2 or 3 weeks, but at this time, we're so far into the process, it's hard to get 10 orders. So we don't want your brick sitting there for 2 or 3 weeks when you expect it to be on the wall. So we try to go ahead and rush those orders through.
And originally with the wall, the introductory price that we talked about the first year was going to be $25, but then it would go up to $35.
Yes, sir.
And that's just been held off on before.
Well,
this.
we held off on it because we still wanted to offer an affordable product, and we knew if we took the price up, that may affect some. But looking at the surrounding communities, we are still well below the average price of a commemorative tile. So we don't think $35 is really going to hurt us that much. What we try to like to do is get a big push between now and whenever we try to change. If we set a date on it, try to get a big push and kind of offer a bargain. This is your last opportunity to get it $25, save $10. So hopefully that'll come out well.
Do you know what Smyrna's charging for theirs?
Smyrna charges, for the Captain Coos Memorial, their brick tiles, same size, 4x8, are $100. Other counties around, Perry County, they charge $100, so we're well below that. Even for their, just a commemorative brick to honor somebody, like if I want to purchase a brick at their depot in honor of Mayor Cole, that's $50. So we're still well below that.
Okay. Any questions?
And also, if there's any damaged bricks up there, that's the city's responsibility to replace those. So these funds, any excess funds we have, are getting depleted pretty quick.
Okay. Thank you,
Any
David.
questions? Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The concern about the kids up there damaging those, has that subsided a little bit?
We haven't had any damage, knock on wood, recently. We did have to replace 3 to 4 tiles several months ago, and I think that was just due to the sealant that was put on to hold those on the wall and the weather conditions at the time. So that didn't stick as well, the construction of pieces, as well as we thought it would. So we had to absorb that cost of replacing those bricks also. But as far as damage, it's been several years since we've actually had any tiles damaged from rocks.
I mean, I think the board's at least my thinking was after people started moving into those apartments, then they knew someone was watching.
Yeah.
And because when they first started, that's when most of the damage came about.
Yeah, and it's a highly visible area. It's well lit. So that's kind of subsided on some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful.
Just a quick question. If we're gonna increase them from 25 to 35, could we offer a discount if there are 10 or more that are submitted together? Just in case somebody from the community wanted to get 5 and they said, oh, I know 5 other people that I can get one. Could we do that to incentivize maybe people to talk about it?
I don't see why not.
Good
Yeah,
idea.
what we try to do is get a big push between now and July 4th. Say if we put this into effect, maybe the 1st of August, that would give us, 2 full months. We can push it out at our July 4th celebration and any event we have in the meantime. But yeah, I'm not opposed to giving a discount. Getting 10 is tough now. When we first started, we had 10 rolling in pretty steady. And then, you know, it's dropped off drastically. We're probably into our 4th year maybe of brick orders. So they're coming in slow.
That may, though, chime in, though, with the reaching out to Legion and the VFW and different groups like that, because they may want to bulk order together.
And it's not just specific to families in Laverne. So we can reach out to other communities. Donaldson, you know, their American Legion's pretty big, VFW in Murfreesboro. So we can reach out to these different cities. So it doesn't have to be a veteran based out of Laverne. Any other questions?
And I'll have to look up how this was approved. I believe the prices were just approved by a motion. So that's what it would take by this board to change that again. So we will come up with a structure and bring that back hopefully at the July meeting. And if this board wants to approve it at that time, we can put the effective date in, whatever y'all decide you want it to be. So we'll work on that over the next month and come back with a proposal to this board.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Dave.
Moving on to Mayor Alderman comments. Alderman Church.
I've had some people in my family and several different residents. We have some concerns about the ball league situation. I was under the impression on the tournaments that they would not have tournaments on the weekends, on Saturdays during the ball league. So we're having some problems with our kids. We get out there to play ball, and there's no umpires. There's no there's no activity, period. But yet the teams we're showing up and we're waiting. We got our kids ready to play ball. And then when you walk over to try to get some information, they actually try to charge you, you know, to walk through the gates, as they call them. That's what a gentleman told me. You know, we had to pay to get in. Well, our concession stand was closed. We had all of our kids out there. So we went ahead and ran a practice because we showed up for a Saturday, and then we were going to take several of the kids over to the concession stand at the larger fields, which are right across from us. And we were told we had to pay admission to enter. And if I remember correctly, there was some verbiage in there that you guys had went over that wouldn't happen. So I don't know if that's something this board addresses or if it's something that David, would that fall under you to get us in the loop on that?
Alderman No may be able to shed a little more light on it than I can. I'm coming in late to the game, so I know they are experiencing some growing pains. I've heard some of what you've mentioned before. Alderman No and I had a meeting 2 weeks ago, maybe last week, with the guy running the league. So there are some growing pains, and we're trying to work through them, trying to offer our services, whatever's going to be best to move them forward. So I haven't gone through the contract, so I don't really know all the stipulations that what they're providing or what they're required to do. I just know that Alderman No and myself have both offered our services to them.
David came in, he's kind of been thrown into the mix here, but the better person to be up here would probably be Felicia. She knows about the RFP and what was said.
When the user agreement was done, I have no problem, and I have no problem pulling a plug on anything that doesn't work.
Well, what's
But
happened?
we do have to give them some time.
No, I'm not asking you
You
to pull
know,
the plug
to
on
get-
anything. All
Right.
I'm saying is there was a lot of momentum going into this. I know we had to hurry up and get it
Yeah,
done.
we were hoping.
We ran out of time. We got a group in here, and a lot of false promises to the citizens of Laverne is what's
Starting to
happened.
sound like it.
And it looks like to me when I walk the parking lot and the majority of the people there were from other counties, so they're coming to, it was a revenue-based tournament. So it was all about the almighty dollar and not the Laverne kids. That's my concern.
Okay, now I do know they were allowed so many tournaments.
Oh,
I
they
don't
are
know-
allowed so many
I don't know how
tournaments.
many, and I don't know how many they have on the books. They were allowed tournaments.
They were.
I do know that.
My sorrow here is when you have two teams show up, one team doesn't show up, we're out there, not just my children, but other children, and these kids are there to play. Okay, if the umpires don't show up, they're 5 years old. We play without an umpire. They don't care who throws the ball, who calls them out. It's just about having fun. But when you take 3 or 4 of the kids over to the concession stand that is open, because theirs is open, it's just something about a hot dog at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's what kids expect. And you go over to the gate, and they tell me, you got to pay to get in. I was like, okay, I paid them.
No, I don't think that was
I paid them. I went
part
on
of
in
it,
and did
so-
the thing. I didn't tell them, I was an alderman or anything. I just said, okay, I paid them. I went up. But there's people out there that don't have that money in their pocket to pay. So
Oh, I understand. And they shouldn't have to pay
They
if
shouldn't have
they're,
to pay.
if
You're
they're
right.
the children
You're
of
right.
Laverne. They should not have to pay. So I will be glad to go and pull that contract and look at it.
Yeah.
And I will get the user agreement from Bruce on Monday, and I will look over it all and let you know what I find.
And if that's possible, since other board members have met, that's something I'd like to do. Of course, we can't do it together, but I would like to meet with the gentleman and
Okay,
see
I'm not
what's going
exactly
on.
sure who it is, because I've not met with him
Okay, great. All
outside of the bid opening, but we can do that.
right, thank you.
I have no problem, thank you.
Anything else? Alderman No.
I'll save my big, long spiel for the meeting, but I just wanted to tell you guys that I got clearance today. I want to invite this side and this side to the Senior Citizens Prom tomorrow from 4 until 7:30 at the multipurpose. And then I want to invite this board to the prom from 4 to 7:30. And let this board know, not you guys, I'm inviting you, but I want this board to know I will personally pay for your ticket. That's it.
Do you get the dress too?
You buying, is this a date? I'm going to pay for your ticket, and I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised and come out there. You'll meet every senior possible. We got some good music. I'll be the DJ. Unfortunately, Amazon messed up my order, and I didn't get my mullet.
I'll pass on the dress myself.
Just the invites out there, that way nobody.
Did you say that you were included city employees in that too?
No, sir, you wasn't listening. Oh, turn your hearing aid up.
I was just checking to be
It's
sure.
inviting,
But he's paying for us.
but I'm paying for the board. Turn it up.
I may have to come do security.
See a speeding ticket in the near future.
Yeah. He drives a gold Ford pickup.
Alderman Jones.
I don't have much to say either on it. I would like to piggyback on Ms. Skinner's comments and just ask everyone to be alert. It's a lot of people are drowning out there from just, we just had one that just jumped off of a deck and never came up. So, especially when you got kids that are out of school now and they're going to be mischievous. So just pay attention and give the non-emergency call a number if you feel that, or give the emergency call number if you feel that they're doing something that's going to endanger them. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Brown.
Well, I'd like to first say it's been quite a number of years since I was invited to prom, so thank you for that. Also, congratulations to our graduates. Laverne High School had a whole bunch of graduates. Graduation was really proud event. I was really happy to be there. I think that we should celebrate these high school seniors that have just graduated and encourage them to go on and get their degree as well, especially with Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise. They have an opportunity to get their 2-year degree without any fees at all. It pays down to the last dollar. That will help a lot of students, a lot of parents also. So Please encourage any high school graduates that you know of to go on and get their associate's degree. Also, I want to remind everybody, our kids are out for summer. It does help with the traffic in the morning and the afternoons. I don't know why it helps so much, but it really does. That being said, they're going to be playing in the streets and in the neighborhoods, and they're going to be playing ball. So just please be on the lookout. No one wants to hit a child, and so just remember when you're in the neighborhoods, just slow down a little bit and pay attention, because the kids are out for summer. So thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank everyone who came out tonight to speak and to be here with us. Want to remind everyone that both police and fire now are on both Facebook and Twitter. They have accounts on both. So there are updates. In fact, I saw one recently, a gentleman they were looking for with police that made the rounds. So be sure to check that out. Remind everybody about the senior prom. Should be lots of fun. And with that, I'll call this meeting adjourned.